And thank you, everybody who's come today. Yeah, I really value this process and the opportunity that 12 step and the shared healing process, the shared healing space gives. It's been a very valuable part of my journey. Um, I think I'll mention, I'm not going to try and give a big history. I'll mention a couple of different things, though, that have one thing which is the first thing that brought me into 12 step. And I think it was around 40, maybe. And I was doing a degree in psychotherapy. And there was a module on alcoholism. And I knew about my brother being an alcoholic. He was an alcoholic really since he was a teenager, my older brother. And so I knew that was nothing new to me. But when we were studying this module on alcoholism, that's when I got to notice that there was all these different types of alcoholic, and that my brother was the very obvious kind, stepping over his body in the morning, or and but that's when I realized that my father was an alcoholic as well. He was a functional alcoholic, and that I'd really grown up in an alcoholic home. And I remember returning from that class, crying all the way home. That was really the start of crying about my childhood life. I went to Al-Anon, and yeah, that really brought home to me how common and how deep the damage is growing up in an alcoholic and dysfunctional home. And but where I was, and the Al-Anon meetings were very spousal orientated, so I couldn't relate to it an awful lot. And so somebody told me about ACA, and I think there was 3 or 4 ACA meetings every week in my town. So that was really amazing to get the language and the culture. And I got the big red book and reading one page after another and getting so much recognition in it, which I didn't know, so much recognition of what was part of me, but what I'd never recognized before. And it made a huge difference to me, because I was being educated about what had happened to me. And in some ways, I find it difficult to describe, because it wasn't a physically violent home. The trauma in it was very oppressive, and I can't remember most of my early child life until sort of 11 or 12. I start to have some memory. Before that, I don't really have any. I remember a few things that they told me about. When my family was abroad, and we were visiting our relatives, brother and I mean, my mother's brother and his family, his wife and children, and we were visiting them. And all the 2 carloads of families went to a park, and with the swings, and all the young kids. I would have been about 2 years old at the time, a little bit older maybe, but around that anyway. And when they got home from the park, they realized they had left me behind. I don't know how you do that. Because between the 2 families, there was only 5 children. It wasn't a lot of children. And my dad told me he drove back to the park to find me. And I was in some caretaker's hut. And he said to me, and I didn't say anything. I was completely quiet. I didn't say anything. I wasn't crying or anything like that. I appeared very calm. How traumatized was I? I don't know, and I can't feel it. I can't feel that period. I was doing some uh, um, peer therapy with somebody else, and so I'd listened to her and I'd sort of given her a listening, and so it was my turn. And she asked me about my childhood life, and I was just like, yeah, it was just kind of normal. This was before ACA. I was just normal, whatever. Nothing really that interesting. And she said, "What would it be like if your son had grown up there?" And I immediately started crying because I still can't feel my childhood emotions. I could feel his childhood emotions. So seeing him or feeling the idea of him being in that environment was devastating. Um, so I still live with that numbness today. And Even talking about that now, it still kind of takes my breath away a little bit. I've probably been speaking too fast as well. So I've thought a bit about this sessions. First time I've done a speaker session, um, and so I've been thinking about some different things. Um, one of them is to let you know that my life is a mess, and that I'm a mess. And I'm not saying that as a criticism of myself, as a condemnation of myself. I'm not saying it in that way. Um, but I can't control my life. I can't control how I'm going to be, or what's going to go on, or how I'm going to react. I can't control that. And I didn't realize that. I was at a 10-day meditation retreat, and I heard somebody shared about them being a mess. And I thought to myself, I've never actually said that. I've never actually admitted that that I'm a mess. Um, and whilst being a mess and living a messy life, I've done an awful lot of things in my life as well. I've a lot of I'd had a strong a sense of self achievement, not in terms of what other people might call achievements, but I was able to live a lot of the life that I wanted to live. I made choices for me. I left my home when I was 18. I went abroad to work, and I think that saved me a lot as well. Having this choice to leave that chaos and the oppression of my home life, and search for and develop something different. And I did do that. That really happened to me. Um, and then much later on, I realized that I had all this suppressed emotion. At the time I started to go to ACA, at the time I started to go to ACA, my marriage was on the rocks. But it was really kind of on the rocks from the time we got married. And my child had nothing to do with the marriage. So that made things a little bit simpler. And I'd heard this idea, this phrase of, we often marry either our mother or our father. Um, and it's a very uncomfortable kind of phrase. Um, but, these things sometimes have a real insight to them as well. And, we often marry the person that has the issues that we need to sort out, the unresolved issues that we had with our parents. And in that sense, I married my father because my wife, her behavior was really like him, very oppressive, very difficult to communicate with. and yeah, it was really painful. And if it would have been if I treated it like a northern relationship, it wouldn't have lasted 6 months. But because we got married, and I really believed in our marriage, I really believed in it. I stood by that painful experience for a lot longer. I tried to get us to go to marriage counselling, and her reaction to that was scorn. Which is a horrible feeling when you're trying to do something good with the person that you're married to. And well, in the end, I realized that I wasn't going to. This wasn't going to go anywhere. She wasn't open, and I was better off moving on. That's what I did. But yeah, she was like him. He's dead now, and things didn't really end up very good between us before he died. But at other stages of our life, we did have some periods of good relationship, mostly because I made the effort for it. I have suffered a crash when I was, what was that age? I don't know, 21 or 22, something like that. A motorbike on the dual carriageway. It was before we had motorways. On the dual carriageway, I was in the fast lane, started off from the lights, and some car from the slow lane came out and yeah, and decided to do a right turn in front of me. So I straightened up the car with my arm and smashed it to pieces and flew off and landed on my head. And I lived, bit of an operation and stuff, but okay. And the driver was being charged with reckless driving, because he was. And I got a phone call from the Gardaí 8 months later saying that, well, the driver's handed in his driving license because he was old and he just couldn't cope with modern driving, really, which is what they wanted. They wanted to get him off the road. And when that happened, and he told me that, I started crying. Why am I crying? I really don't understand this at all. And a friend of mine knew a good psychotherapist, talk therapist. So I went to him and found out I just had all this oppressed feelings and thoughts from my childhood home, and it just started to pour out. So I say as a couple of examples of my background. Well, it's been quite a crazy life. In my 20s, I became a teacher of esoteric philosophy. So that gave my mind a very high level of education and ability, and a certain type of insight as well, which really, really helped me. And it gave me a lot of ideas and structure in my mind, which gave me the ability to respond in different ways. When my son was born, and when he was with me, I was able to raise him in a very different way from how I was raised with my parents. One of the things that I used to do whenever I had a query in my mind about raising my son and what was going on, I'd ask myself about what my parents did, and I would do the opposite. That was it. I did the opposite. And for the most part, that worked really well. And I had a really fantastic relationship with my son for many years. When he was around 17 or so, 16, 17, the symptoms of an illness were developing in me, and that really undermined our relationship. His mother was had a lot of problems, and he said to me that he was that he never had to worry about anything with me. Staying with me was like coming to the rock. He could just relax and not have any problems. And that changed, and he lost that because when my illness developed, I then started to have problems which I didn't have before. So the period that I spent in ACA, and I know this is all jumbled up in a mess, but that's the way it is. That period that I started in ACA was before my illness. And I learned so much from ACA, from the yellow book, the big red book, and sitting there. And it was a timed meeting as well. So sometimes it was down to a minute and a half for a share. But you learned to be quite efficient with your time. And this is your chance. And I liked it as well because, it's like a pizza and everybody gets the same size piece. So there are some real advantages to that. And I appreciate that this style, there's real advantages to this style too. I don't think I would have come back to ACA if it hadn't been for me getting sick. I was clever, still am sometimes, depends on the day and the time. And what I've found is with clever people, we can often find new ways of staying in denial. We can be very clever and just always manipulate our mind or manipulate our perspective so we remain in denial and don't really notice our behavior. It's really easy to do. And I see my son doing that now. So the effect that the illness that developed in me was that it took away that ability for me to escape. And so I've had to face at a much deeper level the childhood trauma. And I don't spend my time trying to reconcile the past, to figure out everything that's happened and every effect that it's had. I can't do that. I don't have the time or the energy. One of the things that I've noticed in this journey back into ACA work is the blameless inventory of my parents. My mother has dementia as well, so she just about remembers who I am still. So there's not a strong living presence of that influence in my life other than what I carry inside myself. I just lost myself there. So when I reviewed the blameless inventory, I realized that I don't really blame my parents anymore for how they behaved, for their shortcomings. My father was my oppressive. My mother never stood up for us. She lived in fear. I imitated her fear. It can be very difficult for me to stand up for myself. And when I became ill, I ended up being in a lot of situations where I was being very unjustly criticized. And I've had to learn to stand up for myself in even more difficult situations than what I had before I was sick. So that's been a real trial because, when you're sick, you need a quiet space to recover. And my quiet space was being ruined and destroyed by very aggressive and unfair criticisms. So instead of getting support, I got criticized instead. And this is still going on today. A lot of that hasn't really changed. I realize we can't change other people. We can't change the world outside. But what there is the possibility of changing is the world inside, and how I connect with other people, how I express it, and what I do. I have a kind of unusual situation. I'm diagnosed with a degenerative neuromuscular illness, and there's no treatment for it as well. I've been in a wheelchair and I've managed to get out of the wheelchair because I knew if I didn't get out of the wheelchair, I was just going to continue to degenerate and die. But because I've got this background in ancient philosophies, and I've been practicing meditation since the age of 18, so I've had some inner elements, inner tools, which a lot of people don't have. And I'm very, very fortunate to have, to have been blessed with those tools. Um, so, uh, yeah, so the environment I'm working in with myself is one for me to actually stay alive. Um, I, both I've got two illnesses, both of them are terminal. Um, so the fact that I'm actually talking here is, one doctor said that it's a miracle that I'm still able to walk. I've been able to reverse some of the damage of one of the illnesses. And so that's really exceptional. There's only like a couple of hundred people in the world who've actually been able to reverse any of the damage. Most people are just dead within 5 years. I've spent a lot of time facing my own death because I've spent a lot of time dying. And in January this year, my son came back from being abroad, and things have never been really good with him since I started to get ill. And he came back, and before he came back, he was, all this kind of sort of a love bombing behavior. I'll help you with this. I'll do this with you. I'll do that. And, I'm like, I've heard all this sort of stuff before, and it's really gone very badly. And so what I've noticed is that as soon as I agree, once I'm taken in by this help bombing, it changes and becomes difficult and problematic and argumentative, and it's not helpful at all. And he's got his issues. And I've had to, on a number of times, distance myself from him because the effect of his issues on being taken out on me is more than I can cope with. The illness that I have, half the people with the illness want to end their lives early. And it's probably more than that. Some people don't admit it. And it's natural because you actually feel yourself, you feel your life going. And, so it's very normal not to want to increase suffering continuously, that being part of the future. So I live with that. And one of the things that I've learned is to try and respond calmly. And even though it's maybe not said quite in these words in the ACA program, when we're talking about meditation and connection with God, when you're really faced with deep problems, we need more than our own limited, I need more than my own limited abilities. And I had a lot of abilities. So it took, it took a lot to really break me down so that I would reach out beyond myself. And that's what ACA has really helped me to reconnect with this time. Is it the 12th promise, which is, as you practice this, you'll see your relationships with yourself, your parents, and God improve. I see my relationship with myself improve. I'm talking better and talking more easily than I was before. My relationship with God, my higher power, has improved. That's something which I'm closely linked with. When I wake up in the middle of the night because some symptom has woken me up, I'll lay there and just rest in the presence of the higher, the greater reality, the higher power. The path that I've had to the higher power has been through meditation, and getting into that space, that aspect of ourselves which is free from opinion, free from free from prejudice, free from conditioning, free from trauma. And that's an aspect of us which I believe that every person has the possibility of accessing that part of our reality and using it to change our lives for the better. I do really do believe that. And improvement with the other part was the improvement with parents. Well, I don't blame them anymore. I'm not sure if there's much more that I can do with that. One's dead and the other's with dementia, so there's not a whole lot of improvement I can really make there. I tried to help my mother at one stage. I want to visit them, and because my father would always talk over her. And so I'd ask her a question and he'd just start talking, and I'd keep looking at her. I would refuse to go along and look at him. And eventually he'd get the answer that actually this isn't his question. He's not actually there to answer for her. It's for her to answer. But you can't save. I can't save. I couldn't save my mother from what's ultimately her choices. But what I can do is help to make better choices myself. And ACA and really the aspect of ACA in which we come together and share our experience is really, really important. And to have a healthy healing space to do that is really, really important. And that means having a place in which there's no politics being mentioned. There's no reference to politics at all. Because bringing politics in, it divides us as people. And then we're caught up in our political divisionary sides. It doesn't matter what, I don't like seeing people with their country or where they're coming from. I don't like seeing that in people's namespace. I don't want to know where you're coming from. I don't want to know. It's got nothing to do with us recovering from childhood trauma. We're just here. This is the common factor that we have, and we should leave the rest aside. There's one person from a country they have up, and their country has threatened my country with economic warfare. I don't feel safe seeing the person promoting their political identity, their national identity. That makes me feel unsafe. Especially that their country is involved in a conflict. I don't feel safe with that. And that's up in my face. I'm being threatened. So we shouldn't have that. I don't think we should have that at all. A lot of the time where we're from doesn't really make any difference. And really in ACA, it doesn't make any difference. So we should just be leaving it outside. And it's been a problem for me, that has, because political comments were made, and I don't feel safe here now. And it's really affected my ability to progress in this group because of those comments that were made. And I'm not sure where I am with that either. But this is part of the process as well, is to say what we're comfortable with and what we're not comfortable with, and what helps us and what doesn't help us, and to actually be able to listen to each other and to be aware of what we're saying. I have to mention something else. Because it affects the way I talk about things as well, and the way I present. Because I was able to reverse some of the damage to my illness, and it was an exceptional. I run a healing group for people with terminal illness to support them to have a different attitude. So I do that every week for the last 3 years. So I'm really used to talking from a bit of a different position So if this is a bit messy in my perspective here, it's because I'm really used to leading a group of people rather than just sharing. So just to be aware of that. And it's a wonderful thing to come in and to share and to help and to support. It helps to have meaning in my life when I do this. And that's one of the reasons why I run the support group that I do. That helps to give me meaning because it helps other people to have meaning too. So I'm a little bit breathless. Last night, and I think for the third time this week, a lot of symptoms which disrupt my sleep. So sometimes I wake up multiple times, sometimes I don't sleep at all. Last night was another one of those nights where I had a lot of problems with sleeping. So that also leaves my brain in a less functional place. And so I just want to, I think I just want to say that one is of the keys for me for healing is honesty. And that's the first principle, is coming out of denial, is really being honest. And it's very hard. I find myself saying things, agreeing to something which I know is not true. Do you like that? Oh, yeah, I like that. No, I don't like it. And I just agree because that's what the way I learned to be, was to give people what they wanted, to be the people pleaser. That's what the way my mother was in her way. And it's not satisfying, and it doesn't work, because I just end up being empty. There are other parts of my life where I really did follow my own journey as well. So it's all a little bit mixed up and crazy. And that's probably the way it'll continue to be. And that's probably okay too. Being a bit mixed up and crazy and just trying to deal with today as it is, and what are the problems that I have today? What can I deal with today? One of the main practices that I've had for many years is being kind to myself. When I realized the seriousness of my illness, and I could really feel that I was broken in some different way inside. Not broken just because of the conditioning that I grew up with, but at a more deeper biological level. And I could just feel myself getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and I wanted to end my life, and I realized that if I'm hard on myself, it's just going to get worse. And I asked myself the question, is it possible for me to be kind to me no matter what's going on? And I realized that it was possible. So I started practicing being kind to myself. And I might be kind to myself 20 times or 50 times a day when I feel myself a bit constrained, when I feel myself being self-critical, or when I feel myself being critical of other people as well. I don't have to be kind to them. I need to be kind to me, because I'm actually in that small space in my mind or in my emotions, which is angry and really negative towards other people. I practice being kind to myself then as well. And that relieves the pressure of being negative towards other people. And that's really progressed me. And that's an element of the loving parent, the unconditional loving parent, or loving God, is expressed and active in me in my kindness towards myself. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing or what I'm not able to do, or whatever is going on. Can I just be kind to myself? Yes. And there's a real relief with that as well. One of the things that has developed in this period with ACA is hearing the voice of some of the inner children, and well, specifically the teenager who's become much more vocal. And there's something that he's wanted to say, which was the promise, which is, I think it's the promise: expect the best and get it. And he says this is a flawed idea, um, for two reasons. One, if you expect the best, you're going to be disappointed because life will throw shit at you that you cannot prevent happening. Um, so if you expect the best, you're going to be disappointed. So expect the best and get it? No. But he's kind of tuned it slightly differently to expect the best and give it. So it's not demanding that life has to live up to what I expect and it better give me that. No, it's about, well, what's the best that I can give to myself, firstly, and to other people, and to give that to myself and to give that to other people. And my teenage self is very happy to get that out there. Was there anything else he wants to say? There's a couple of other parts of myself that I need to work on. One is my early child self, which is numb. And I'm just being very careful about that. And kindness is great. And the other one is my adult self, whilst I was becoming sick, because the illness damaged my brain as well, and so I wasn't able to make full sentences, let alone have a conversation for a period. And it was very difficult not being able to cope with the illness. But that's the nature of illness as well, is the inability to cope. My primary directive, if you like, is to live the best life I can, which means staying alive. And that means dealing with the physical illnesses is my first priority. Dealing with the childhood trauma and helping this to heal support my physical health. So it has a particular place in my healing program. And it all comes together somehow in a messy kind of a way. So it's good to take breaks. I spend a lot of time meditating, just give myself some space to be, to listen to how I am, to not to judge it. These were things I never had growing up. And these are the things that support me and help me to stay alive today. When my son came back this year and he did his help bombing, and that fell apart pretty quickly, I said to one of my friends, I said, I wonder how long it'll take before his coming back to help you, Dad, falls apart. And yeah, within 2 hours, it was pretty falling apart, actually, within the first 2 hours. Within the first 2 hours of him being back, and I hadn't seen him for, I'd seen him 6 months previously, but anyway, within 2 hours, I had to get up and leave the room because he was making things so difficult in terms of conversation, making problems and finding problems and difficulties. And it's not trying to resolve anything. It's just this, it's just his need for drama. But I need to be in a healing space with other people. I need to be with other people who are consciously and actively and have a real commitment to healing in their lives. I can't be with other people. The number of problems that I have, one of the symptoms is emotional dysregulation. So we have a normal emotional pattern of how we behave, whether it's good or bad, whatever. We have that a regular emotional regulation, whatever it is that we're used to. And that actually, not for everybody, but it did happen for me, that got really damaged with the illness. So instead of me being calm like I used to be and being the home which didn't have problems in it for my son, I became highly reactive. So if I got angry, which I rarely got angry, I got intensely angry. I had to learn how to live with the feelings of anger. I didn't have them often enough in my life to know how to do that. And being in an angry state is really bad for my illness. So being with people who are not on the healing path, on the path of recovery, I really have very little time or energy for. I have to keep my space and distance from them. Because I can be so easily affected by the intensity of my own emotional reactions now. And that's the reality I have now. And that's part of this incurable illness. And I realized that I've been incredibly lucky to have lived a good life for as long as I did. Despite the problems and difficulties and everything in it, I've been incredibly lucky, and I still am. Some of my friends now that I've met through illness have died, and I continue to I continue to face reality and live. One of the things that I'll mention, which has really helped me, is using meditation and to interrupt the reactions, to interrupt the conditioning. When we're following a path of reaction, and to interrupt that. The illness I have affects my muscles, and so they go into contraction, and then it becomes very difficult to walk or to hold a fork or stuff like that. It becomes very difficult. So by stepping into the space of meditation, of inner meditation, into that quiet space, or I'll say the same thing a different way, by stepping into the relationship with a higher power. For me, the two are the same kind of thing. By stepping into this space, this breaks the rhythm. This not the rhythm's not the word I want. This breaks the flow. And gives a chance to reset in a calmer space. And then it's possible to react calmer and step out of this reactor position and entering the acting position, where I'm living life from a calmer place, a place which expresses kindness to myself, and one in which I'm still interested in living, and seeing what life will bring me and what I can do with it. So I think I'm going to wrap up with this, and just encourage everybody to continue doing the work, and working on the smaller problems is often the faster way of going forward. Because if I try to work on the bigger problems I've inherited, like the numbness of my childhood. It's kind of a massive thing. I'm not just going to be able to solve that. So I look for places where I'm repressing my own feelings or thoughts so that I give them more of a chance to live and to breathe and just to accept them. I don't have to agree or disagree, just to accept them. And to do that in places in my life where the consequences, the weight of it is less. So I'm dealing with something which is lighter and therefore it's more manageable. It's easier to be successful with something which is small than being successful with something with a big problem. So I try to keep my focus on small problems and small challenges and keep practicing every single day, every moment that I'm conscious is an opportunity for me to improve my state of mind, to recover from the effects of childhood trauma, to live a better quality of life and have better relationships with other people. And ACA really plays a role in doing that. So I'd just like to say thank you to all the people who really, not just the people here who have been part of organising today and this setup on Zoom, but all the way back for the people who have organised the very beginning of AA and started this process of shared healing. I'd like to just pay my respect and my gratitude to all the people who've contributed over time. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.